Welcome to Undercover Arts Live, where you can meet the artists, chefs, performers, and organizations who shape the culture of Southern Arizona. SACA strengthens the bonds between people, place, and purpose through collaborative, arts-driven experiences. You can support SACA by becoming a donating member at saca.org. Art inspires, culture unites.
I think the show's about to start. I better take my seat.
Welcome to Undercover Arts Live. My name is Kevin Larkin, manager of the Catalyst Arts and Makerspace. My guest today is Lisa Sturz. Lisa is founder, artistic director, and head puppeteer for Red Herring Puppets. She has over 40 years of experience in building, performing, and directing puppetry for theaters, museums, and educational institutions. Her television and film credits include Muppets in Space, Murphy Brown, Ninja Turtles 3, just to name a few. With Red Herring Puppets, she has written over 18 original productions, and some of those are educational productions for children, about topics ranging from electricity to the life of Buddha, all sorts of cool stuff. She recently relocated to Tucson and opened up a puppet studio right here in the Tucson Mall. I know that was a long intro, but Lisa, you deserve it. Welcome to Undercover Arts Live.
Shucks, thank you, Kevin.
So, you've had such a long and distinguished career, over 40 years of puppetry. I figure we could start off by talking about just some of your favorite moments.
Favorite moments? Well, for one, it's just, I've gotten to work with some really great people. And I'm thinking if I have to choose a favorite, I worked with the Lyric Opera of Chicago on their Ring Cycle. And if you're familiar, it's 4 operas. And so there were lots of puppets. I built a 40-foot dragon for Siegfried. I built like 20-foot giants for Rheingold. And I had a blast. The woman who was the choreographer, Deborah Brown, she was a friend of mine, and she was the choreographer then for Cirque du Soleil, and she did all these great things with trampolines, and basically Debbie and I got to create all the visuals. So that was really an opportunity. And my favorite moment was when we had an orchestra dress rehearsal, and it was the first time we were showing the 40-foot dragon to the production team. We'd been rehearsing on our own in a separate room. So Zubin Mehta is conducting, and it's really his rehearsal. And he said, okay, for this scene, I want to sit in the production booth. And he had his assistant conduct. And he was just jumping up and down, clapping, and saying it's the best dragon I've ever seen. And that was really, really fun. And it was 17 manipulators, 17 guys who were working the dragon. So
that's a lot of moving parts.
It was a lot of moving parts, and I was 7 months pregnant, and
wow.
So an extra moving part.
So you are a graduate of UCLA and you got your master's degree in puppetry, and it's kind of cool because before this interview, I went back and looked at your resume and just saw some of the productions you've been a part of, and I get a little starstruck, I'm not gonna lie, seeing all the names on there of the Hollywood movies you've worked on. Can you share some of those memories? Because that was in your early years after graduating.
Yeah,
you worked in Hollywood?
I did my MA at UConn, which is the National Puppetry Institute, and I did an MFA at UCLA. But some of the movies I got to work on, the very first movie out of college was with Michael Jackson and Francis Ford Coppola, Angelica Houston. It was this big Hollywood extravaganza, and like Elizabeth Taylor showed up. It was like a who's who kind of thing. I'm like, this is good, you know.
Oh my gosh.
And we actually did improvs for the first 2 weeks before we started taping. So we were just hanging out and playing that Michael Jackson was our camp counselor, Angelica Houston owned the camp, and we were just, you know, kind of improvising, getting into character and stuff before. And that was really fun.
You get to hang out and goof around and get into character. I
did. And George Lucas was producing that. And so from that, then he asked myself and Bruce Schwartz was our lead puppeteer, if we would do Howard the Duck. And Bruce didn't want to, so I got to kind of do casting and help out, and, you know, with Howard the Duck. So that was like
Whoa.
my next movie.
I remember that movie when I was a kid. I remember watching Howard the Duck. And you told a story previous to this interview, or prior to this interview, where George Lucas actually showed you how to use a video camera.
He did. It was, I actually went to UCLA with Tim Robbins. So he was, we weren't close friends, but
Right.
we knew each other, and I'd worked on a show of his after school, like that he did with his own theater company before Tim was known or famous. And he owed me money. He never paid me for a puppet. I built a changeling for Midsummer's Night Dream. And I'm like, Tim, we're both cast on this movie. I'm like, Tim, you're going to have to pay up. I know he's like, no, I will. I'm sorry. So he said, you can get me back. Fair is fair. And he was doing this one shot with an ultrasound where he got dragged through the water. And he just hands me his camera and goes, could you tape this for me? I want to see it. Just for him to have. And I didn't know how to use a video camera. And I'm just standing there, and I see George. I'm like, George, I bet you know how to use a camera. He's like, yeah. And so he showed me how to use it, and I got good shots of Tim.
That's crazy. Good instructor, I would imagine.
Yeah, he knew how to do it.
Yeah. That's so cool. I mean, those are just fun stories to hear. I think, those have to be great memories. But you moved from Hollywood, you relocated to North Carolina, and that's really where you built Red Herring Puppets. And you were there for how long?
I was there for 20 years. I started Red Herring Puppets in LA and was doing a lot of bookings and stuff, but I had kids, and I didn't want to raise them in LA. I was afraid I wouldn't like them. But I say that in jest, but I really wanted them to be able to run around in the woods.
Yep.
And we did that in North Carolina. And it was a really, really good place to grow up, I think.
Totally. It's beautiful out there. What city were you in?
In Asheville.
In
Asheville, North Carolina, in the mountains, the Blue Ridge Parkway. And
yeah.
it's really nice. And, it just so happened that once I moved to North Carolina, the Muppets started shooting a lot of their features in the studios in North Carolina on the coast. And so I got to do several Muppet movies, which was really fun. And one of my favorites was I did Elmo in Grouchland, and Carol Spinney, who plays Big Bird, he also plays Grouch. And I got to be his left hand, for the whole movie, which was so fun. He was just such a generous performer and lovely to work with. And
what a cool
it was
experience.
Really, really fun.
That's so cool. So you're building your own puppet company and getting to work on cool productions in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And even all the productions you've done over there are, expansive with children's museums and educational programs. You built this whole thing in North Carolina, and then you recently, only a year ago, moved here to Tucson. Why Tucson?
Why Tucson? My husband's family, he lives here, his mom and two of his sisters, and we came for Christmas, and which we've done many times. And while we were there, he's just, I need to move here. I need to be closer to my family. I'm like, do I need to move here? He's like, yeah, you do. So we did. It was really hard. You can imagine, I have so many productions. I have so much stuff. It took one small, pod to move the little bit of furniture that we took, and like 3 big ones to move. My studio and my fabric and my bandsaw and all my sewing machines. And really, to start over, it was months and months of packing and unpacking.
That's always a challenge, just moving to a new place and starting over and finding your community again. But now that I feel like you've done it for so long, you just immediately attract the people that...
Well, I met Saka. I met Matt and Kevin, really. Actually, working with Saka's been a godsend, because Matt right away put me in touch with people and encouraged me to get the studio here in the mall, showed me what you all are doing here, and it's great to be your neighbor.
It's so good to be your neighbor. And you're talking about Matt Rowland, our director of programs.
I am. And I'm talking about you too, Kevin.
And we're talking about each other. Your first show was here in Catalyst, which was awesome. It was La Befana, an Italian grandmother Christmas tale, kind of an old Italian tale. And you actually moved into the old Saka offices.
I did.
Across the mall.
I have one of your desks.
Amongst many other things you added to it. Well, recently in your studio, we got a tour from a good friend of yours.
This is true.
Who is this person?
Robie. If I say his name, he's likely to come out. So
Okay, should we go check out the studio?
yeah, let's go.
I'm standing here at Red Herring Puppets Studio and Theater in the Tucson Mall, and I'm supposed to meet Robie, the star of the show here, but they haven't shown up yet.
Ta-da!
Robie!
Hi.
How's it going?
Hey,
It's nice to
Kevin,
meet you. I'm Kevin.
Hey.
Hey, great to meet you. Can you show me around a little bit?
Oh, I'd love to. Come on in.
Cool, let's do it.
Come on, Kevin.
Wow, so much cool stuff. I mean, live theater, museums, and aquariums. There's so many props around here. Pretty cool.
Yeah. Those are all, things that Red Herring has built and shows that Red Herring has created. Lots and lots. Come on, I'll show you more.
Cool.
Come on, Kevin. Look over
Alright.
there.
Cool.
That's the stage.
That's the stage?
Yeah.
That's where all the magic happens?
Well, yeah, a lot of it. Yeah, we do marionette shows and all kinds of shows. And the audience can sit here
Cool.
and look at the stage.
So it's a little theater.
Yeah.
How many people can fit in here?
In the past, we could fit 60, but now we could probably fit 2.
2 people, me
with
and
social
you.
distancing, I'm just kidding, but
We're a little close right now.
yeah.
But I feel somehow very trusting of you. Where are you from?
I'm from Planet Obi. Have you been there?
Obi? No, I haven't even heard of it. How do we go? How do we get there?
It's you go out the mall and then you go 600 trillion billion thousand million light years and turn right.
6 billion trillion thousand light years and
It's
turn
far.
right?
Yeah. Hey,
Yeah?
I got my spaceship. One
Oh.
second.
Are we going to go
Here
to
it is.
Obi right now?
Come on. Let's
Okay.
go.
I'm in.
Hello, everyone. My name is Glow.
I'm her cousin. They call me Flo.
We're really glad you're here because in the coming hour, we are going to talk about nature's
Superpowers. We use electricity to light our show, to make our voices louder. This invisible force can generate heat, light, sound, and power.
Robie, thank you so much for giving us a tour of Red Herring Puppet Studio.
Well, you're welcome. I hope you can come to a show sometime.
I know that was such a cool little excerpt. Were those all your friends in the show?
Oh, yeah. They're all my friends.
That's amazing. Well, I want to come see you next time.
Aw, shucks. That'd be great.
Thank you.
Oh.
Red Herring Puppet Studio, such a cool space. Probably the best tour guide that one could ever ask for. Robie, I even got to go to a different planet in that tour.
He likes taking people around, but he didn't show you the backstage.
He didn't show me the
No,
backstage.
where all the industrial sewing machines
Ooh.
and the power tools.
So
I
you
think
make
he gets a little nervous back there.
Oh yeah, he doesn't like he likes the stage. I mean,
Yes.
he's set for the main stage, the lights and the action. But you make puppets in the back of Red Herring Puppet
I
Studio.
do, and I fabricate big props. I'm doing something for the Children's Museum. So yeah. And
So cool.
I've been also making thousands, making masks during the pandemic because I've got so much fabric and
Oh,
working
wow.
with Mending Souls to
Mending Souls, who is providing masks to healthcare workers.
the hospitals, police, the fire, and
So you've repurposed the studio.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And I saw you dropped off some of your masks here at the office, and they're colorful. They're kind of like Robie. So your studio is also a theater, which Robie showed us, and I've seen a show there, a show called Little 1 Inch, which you performed, I think, in January and February.
Yeah.
And then you had a couple shows canceled from COVID, and we're hoping that we can get back to it one day soon.
We've rehearsed. We're ready. We're ready to show people, to bring in an audience. But of course, we want to
Yep.
make sure that it's safe, and we're working hard.
Now, can puppets catch the coronavirus?
Well, most of the puppets have masks.
Okay, good.
So I don't think they can catch it, but they possibly could be carriers. So
Yeah.
if people come into the studio, we can't really have them touching.
Right.
puppets.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Well, when the mall reopens, everyone be sure to go check out Red Herring Puppet Studios. It's a magical place, I have to say. And with all of the world that you walk into when you go into Red Herring Studios, I'm curious, where did that start? Like, how did you get into puppetry? What first sparked you?
You know, interestingly, I did make some puppets when I was younger, probably middle school age. I took a class and I was really, really shy. And puppets was great for me because I like to perform, but, you know, that whole shy kid thing. So I still have puppets that I made paper mache from back then. But I really got interested when I was in college. I was majoring undergrad in theater and in religious studies, but mostly like comparative mythology and Carl Jung and working with archetypes. It was a small school, so that was how I could do that. And they sent me, I got selected by the school to go to this National Theater Institute for acting and directing. And there was a guy making puppets there, this man, Rufus Rose, who was the original creator of Howdy Doody. And
Oh, wow.
it changed my life. His house was built on these like 4-foot levels, so a wall would come down and become a marionette stage or a rod puppet stage. And all of a sudden I'm like, I can do the Ramayana, I can have Ravana with 10 heads, I can tell stories from all over the world. And you probably noticed, you saw the Japanese show. I realized an influence was my grandma, who was a travel agent. And back then, for her generation to be she was married, but traveling around the world by herself, she brought me back dolls from every country. And so I grew up with dolls from Thailand and, you know, Asia and from Egypt. And I loved the costumes. And I used to make costumes for all my dolls and my trolls. So I think that combination really struck a chord with me. And I was able to perform as well as design, as well as write.
There's so many parts to it. I mean, even, the way that you perform and then even like the character development and the costumes. I mean, there's just, puppetry is a universe, which I think in seeing La Befana, for instance, at Catalyst when you did it, just the amount of different types of puppets that you use in one show blew my mind. I thought it was going to be marionettes, on a little stage, and then you ended up doing shadow puppets, you ended up doing a blacklight sequence, you had the marionettes, you had numerous sizes of the characters, and it was just so cool to see what we call puppetry is actually a huge sphere of different methods and techniques from around the world. Can you share some of your favorite of the types of puppets out there?
Well, for me, it's about content. And that's the first thing when I'm creating a new show is, what is this about and why am I doing it? And what do I have to say about this? And then based on that, it's kind of, well, this is going to need to fly. Marionettes fly really well. Hand puppets don't fly really well, but they can pick things up. So some of it is deciding what suits the story best. And then in a show, you had mentioned earlier, I have an adult show about my grandfather. And in that show, I kind of pull out all kinds of different puppetry because it's needed to tell the story. And one of the things I often use is a cranky. It's like, in my grandfather's prayers, it's a 25-yard painted backdrop that scrolls by. And because my grandfather was a famous cantor. He was actually Leonard Bernstein's teacher. And working on that show had to do with my own, coming to terms with my own ancestry. So it was a Torah. And then it gets undressed and it's the scroll of his life. And the light, which there's kind of a symbolism of the eternal light over the Torah arc, goes behind, and then there's shadows projected onto that. There's lots of other kinds of puppetry and film involved in that as well. But that's kind of how the decision making goes, is trying to find the metaphor that will best tell that story.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, with a 25-yard scroll, you can tell a whole sequence of events just by turning it. And I mean, you even did that in Little 1-Inch, which was a Japanese tale, and it was so cool because as the puppet's flying, the background's changing. I think he's flying in a boat.
He's sailing through a boat.
He's flying through the water in a boat.
And the scenery goes by. And
yeah.
And that was fun because I used to do some sumie, the Japanese ink painting, so I did that whole backdrop.
And you designed that whole thing.
Yeah.
So you're painting, you're designing the costumes, you're doing the voices. It's so impressive. And so when you come up with content for your own shows, like you're saying, what sparks you on that? I mean, I've noticed you do children's shows, but you also do shows for adults. Like, how do you decide what to take on?
Well, a lot of my shows are curriculum-based. I've done a lot of work in the schools. I've had a national touring company for many years where we really traveled all over the country. I was teaching at Warren Wilson College, and some of my students, when they graduated, they could work for Red Herring and tour, so that worked out really well. So I have shows on electricity and on life cycles and on the solar system and Aesop's fables, stories that they learn about in school. And I really love working with curriculum because it's about something. And it's very rewarding when you see the evaluations and how students, you can really support the classroom learning. And I've worked on arts and integration with a workshop with the Kennedy Center and designing classroom-based residencies, and I really, really like that work. My mom was a teacher, so that's kind of fun for me. And I try to take that over into my adult work too. We did a big show called Greed, where my husband he's many things, but a political economist, and wrote a book called Deep Economics about income disparity during the what do you call it?
Great Depression?
Well, no, the Occupy.
The Occupy movement, yeah, sure.
Because a lot of it, so really exploring how did we get to where we are.
Right.
And we did a thing about FDR and the New Deal and how the New Deal was struck down by the Supreme Court. So we have all these blocks that spell out the New Deal, and then they open up in puppet scenes, like they built the Appalachian Trail, and things would come out of the blocks. And then I built this 6-foot gavel and a huge head, and you see the New Deal being struck down and thrown all over the stage.
Wow.
And, so trying to find those metaphors that you'll remember.
Right.
Is
storytelling.
We did a big piece called Beware of Delaware, which is all the corporations that are based in Delaware and the tax laws in Delaware and how they differ and how there's no protection for the environment or for the workers. So got into a lot of political stuff that way. And of course, this show about my grandfather is very much a story about transcendence, about immigration, about the diaspora and cultures moving, and family, and what's important. So
yeah, I mean, that must have been an amazing experience, just digging back into your own roots and finding, I'm sure, all sorts of treasures that you could find a way how to retell through your own art.
It was very meaningful, and for me the really deepest part about that production is the music.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather was a 4th generation cantor, as far as we can tell. It probably went back farther than that. He was a world-class opera singer, trained at the Liszt Musical Academy, was the lead tenor in the Hungarian opera, and then during World War I, he was a chaplain, and that really he felt like I need to sing to comfort people. I need to bring God closer to us if there's any possibility. And so it's just so resonant in those wavering quarter tones, and it was just so inspiring to work with that music. And there's a whole level for me of that production of here. I've never met my grandfather, but he was an artist, and
right.
That's kind of what I do in a different field, obviously. But connecting with him on that level, on what that means.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say for him, the music was more important than the definition of God or where it came from or what religion you're from.
Right.
It was more the transcendence of the music. And I kind of feel that way too, that it's that otherness, it's something magical, something more ancient that comes through.
Right, yeah. The power of art and creativity where it's outside of words.
I did this one scene with him, which was really grounding for me, where, because I never met him, I had lots of pictures of him. He was reasonably famous, so there was a lot of photographs. I cut them out, I made copies of them, and then I cut them out and I jointed them so that I shot it against a green screen. So I basically animated him moving. And then I shot myself against green screen and we edited together so I could actually have conversations with him.
Wow.
And he actually, I got to hug him.
Wow.
And stuff in this virtual world, and that worked for me pretty well.
And that's in the show?
It's in the show.
That's incredible. So you're a character in that show?
Yeah, it's a multimedia show, so it's not
Right.
all puppets. There's marionettes, and this is another example. The metaphor for me is my family was very big on education, and I think the Jewish culture in general, what I was taught was they can't take that away from you. So you need to learn, you need to study, you need to play a music, you need to have skills in your hands that nobody can take.
Right.
So I built these oversized books, and I have this staircase. And like when my mom was applying for college, she was only allowed to apply to Radcliffe, which, the sister school of Harvard, because otherwise it just wasn't good enough.
Wow.
And so I have the kids trying to climb this academic ladder, and he's on top, kind of judging it. And then later, those books transform into a boat, and he travels to Jerusalem in 1933, to gather ancient music, because he was also a scholar of this liturgical music from 2,000, 3,000
Right.
years old. He did before Gregorian chants and showed the influence of the Jewish music on the Gregorian chants. So anyway, it becomes this, and then he goes back to Hungary. And the books open up and they become the shtetl, the streets of the shtetl. They become the Dome of the Rock. They become, he goes back to Palestine, so they become the sites of Palestine, and then they become the shtetl. And so there's this transformation that happens throughout, which to me is a beautiful metaphor for his life.
Right, right.
You
Wow.
take what you have within you and you use it for different things.
Yeah. That's what a cool project to get to work on. That's just amazing. That was one of the most recent ones that you did here in Tucson, correct?
I did it here at the Jewish Community Center in February, and it's actually airing currently on JLTV. They have about 10 air dates, so I think we're about a third of the way through this cycle.
So people can still see this
They can
amazing
still see
production.
it.
Yeah, very cool. And outside of your work with the theater, you tell me about some of the educational residencies. Like, what can someone expect if Red Herring Puppets comes to your school?
If Red Herring Puppets comes from your school, in 1 week, we're gonna have every kid in the class make a puppet, whether it's a shadow puppet or a hand puppet, and put on a show that's gonna support whatever you're learning about. So for example, I've done lots of residencies on animal groups, mammals, amphibians, on the life cycles of different animals. I've done residencies on fairy tales, on a unit on Africa, and we'll do an African alphabet, or we'll tell a story. I record the kids doing the dialogue, and that way too, when they're performing, it's a little much to ask them to memorize lines, project, and work a puppet. And also I get a better performance out of them because I can coach them and like, oh, come on, let's see, can you make that voice sound bigger? Or,
Yeah.
I can edit it. So we get an edited soundtrack, and that way if kids are absent, you still got your soundtrack. And they put on a show. Usually for sometimes the whole school, their parents come. Sometimes it's for the rest of the third grades, or however the residency's designed.
Is this available for adults too? This sounds amazing.
Oh yeah. And
Okay.
because I've taught college too, I've got a lot up my sleeve for projects.
All
and-
age levels.
Yes.
Very cool. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for joining us today. We're talking with Lisa Sturz with Red Herring Puppets, puppeteer, educator, designer, producer, you name it. Where can people find out more about you?
Good question. Redherringpuppets.com. And if you go to the website on the homepage, you can sign our mailing list, and then we'll let you know when the theater reopens as soon as we can do it safely. And you can explore the website. There's all kinds of information there for film and television, theater, et cetera, et cetera. It's all there.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on Undercover Arts Live, and I'll see you soon in the mall, neighbor.
Yes, you will.
Bye, guys.
Time to wake up, my friends. Lots of puppeteer for sale. Hi.